The more we can release these emotions and allow them to flow through us, the more healthy we're going to be, because we're not using up primal life force to hold a lid down on feelings that don't want to be held down. They want to flow through us.
We're naturally in this high frequency in the present moment. The way to exist there more often is just to release the repressed emotions of these lower frequency emotions. If people understood that, rather than being labelled with mental illnesses and going on medication to try and numb these feelings, I think people would do it.
It's so important for our health, for how we show up as a parent, for the kind of life that we attract, for the people that we attract.
Welcome to Becoming Untriggered, a podcast brought to you by psychodynamic coaches and parents of three, Lavinia Brown and Andrew Lynn.
Together we normalise and unpack common challenges faced by couples and parents, explore how these could be symptoms of unprocessed trauma, and support you with the tried and tested tools for you to show up as the mum or dad, partner, and person you deserve to be.
Hi, and welcome to Becoming Untriggered podcast. Today, we're going to be looking at the frequency or the vibration of your emotions and why that matters. And it matters because not only does it affect how you feel, obviously, we feel good or we feel bad, depending on the kind of mood that we're in or whatever emotion is passing through us. This obviously affects the people around us, including our partners and children, but it also affects other things that are maybe not so obvious, such as your health and your creativity. We want to unpack that by using as our guide a chart by Dr. David Hawkins, which we will put a link to below because it's super interesting and I think a really important part of understanding your healing journey, where you're starting from in terms of that vibration and where we're aiming for, what vibration we want to end up at.
I thought this chart was really interesting. You found it last week, partly because it describes the journey that we take people on, or the healing journey, whatever you want to call it. A lot of the people that come to us are certainly experiencing the emotions that are on this chart on the lower end of the frequency. And like you said, that has impacts on our whole life. Not only how we perceive the world, how we feel, but especially important for our clients is the environment that we create for our children and also our relationships with our partner.
Yeah, so starting at the bottom, it's not surprising really. I wasn't surprised by this, although there were some emotions that I was surprised by, which is what I want to unpack a bit more. But at the very bottom is guilt and shame. These two are really toxic and they are way lower, interestingly, than anger and grief, which is the emotions that at least I encourage my clients to feel in order to progress upwards towards acceptance and love. That all tracks, but the guilt and the shame are at the very bottom. So I'm not going to pretend that I'm a physicist because I'm not. But in terms of vibration, shame is 20 hertz and guilt is just above that at 30. So that's really low. It's funny because I often use the analogy with my clients of shame being a cloak, like a really heavy cloak that you've been given that isn't even yours, because it feels heavy. So I think that's really interesting that I thought it was heavy. And it is really, really low. It's dense. I know we've done an episode on this already, that shame is just so insidious. And it's quite invisible, and yet it colors not only how you feel, how you react, how you see the world, like you said. It covers absolutely everything, and it really makes your life an absolute misery. So I'm not surprised that guilt and shame are at the very bottom, because they're not only quite destructive in my mind, but they are also quite cyclical. Because they're so heavy, I think they keep you down. It's quite hard. You have to make quite an effort to break out of that band of frequencies.
Yeah, definitely. The thing that struck me was that a lot of these low frequency energies, they're basically repressed emotions. So they're not necessarily emotions you feel now. Like you don't feel shame in the present moment. You carry around shame. It's a repressed emotion. It's part of the foundation of who you are. It's buried deep in your unconscious. So let's talk a bit about where shame comes from. I don't think anyone naturally feels shame. It's something that you've been made to feel. It's an experience you've had, probably at the hands of somebody else, where you've been shamed. And I think that's quite a common childhood experience where parents or teachers or whatever it is use shame as a way to change your behavior. You've done something wrong. You are wrong. This is going to happen. Whatever it is, it's an experience that you witness at the hands of somebody else as a child, and you take it on board. You feel shame. You can't process the shame. So the shame is stored within you. But also it's a deep lying self-belief that I am shameful, that I should be ashamed about my behavior.
Yeah, and it's interesting going back to this chart that what we're trying to describe is that some emotions are more sticky and deeper. And in this chart, the emotions that we consciously feel passing through us, such as joy, we don't feel joy all the time. We don't feel anger all the time. We don't feel sadness all the time. These are all much higher up the chart. So it feels to me like these denser energies almost pervade your system and take up home in your system and then color whatever else it is that passes through because it's lighter and therefore maybe can pass through you. But yeah, I agree with you. I think guilt and shame always come from some figure of authority. The biggest thing is conflating behavior with quality of a being. It's, yes, you've done something wrong, but it's then making that person feel like they are wrong, they are broken. Thankfully, I think, whatever you think of gentle, conscious, respectful parenting, these new parenting movements, I think that's one good thing. Shame is not a part of them. There's been a big move away from separating behavior from how good or, inverted commas, bad that child is.
I think that's an essential part of parenting. Yeah, I think you're right. Just thinking about that chart, I think the lower frequencies, they call them strong or weak. The shame, because it's an extreme frequency, that means it's harder to shift in a way because you need love and acceptance to release the shame. But because shame's so far away from it, almost drags you down, which means it's really hard to accept yourself if you've got shame at the same time. So let's talk about where shame comes from. And I think it's a pattern. You would only shame your children if you feel shame yourself, which means you're probably likely to have been parented that way. It's an emotion that gets passed down the generations, almost like a parenting technique. But you can see from this chart how dangerous it is, how powerful it is to the human being, how if you shame your children or you were shamed, it affects every aspect of your life.
And I want to give a note of hope that, as we've mentioned before, all of these feelings, if they feel sticky, because everything can feel sticky, anger can feel sticky, it can be quite hard to get rid of deep-seated dislike or grief. That can be very hard to shift. And sometimes we don't want to shift it, especially if it's associated with someone having moved on, passed on, that we love. So it's almost like that grief then represents that person, and to not feel it means we've forgotten about them. But these feelings can all be released through consciously feeling them. And some people say to me, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, there's a difference between allowing yourself to feel anger and talking about it and swearing and maybe expressing it to a friend, and consciously sitting down, carving out time to be still, to be quiet on your own, to feel whatever it is that you're feeling, whether that's journaling it out or throwing a cushion around or having a conscious cry. All of these things can be shifted in that way, especially if we're giving them a target. So especially if we're directing those feelings towards the person that we're feeling it about. And this isn't sending it in their direction. This isn't like voodoo. I want to make that really clear. You're giving a channel to something that's already there, and you're allowing it to escape via that channel. So you're not sending it to anyone. You're just allowing yourself to have some direction. Shame, you can sit and feel the shame, and it feels horrific. It's probably one of the worst feelings to feel. That's why it's so hard to get rid of, because no one wants to feel it. We will do everything we can not to feel it. But if you have shame or guilt, then I really recommend that you sit down, you carve out the time to write about whatever it is. Allow that writing to perhaps be that catalyst that gets it stirred up. We're not necessarily talking about shame in terms of one act that you might have done that's shameful, although by all means you can release that too. This is more shame about who you are, isn't it? Shame about the way you show up, the way you behave, whether you're broken or not. So yeah, all of these feelings can be released. That is how we move up the chart.
My experience with shame with clients is that they find something to project the shame onto. So recently I've worked with somebody who had the childhood experience of feeling ashamed, and then also had a phobia, and they attached that shame to the phobia. So they believed they were ashamed about a behavior, which is what we normally do. But actually we're just getting that repressed shame that we experience as a child and then projecting onto an area of our life. And that's the thing that keeps it alive. So I'm ashamed about something I did. I'm ashamed about my parenting. I'm ashamed about something. But actually, that's just finding a place for that shame. Before you release the shame, you've got to unpack all of that and find out, oh, actually, I'm not ashamed about something I did. I was made to feel ashamed in this experience at school, at home, whatever it was. And then you can see that actually you were innocent, but this behavior didn't deserve to be shamed. That brings it into the consciousness of this process. And then that allows you to let go of it because it's not mine.
Yeah, that's a great point. So actually you can use the memory or the experience, if you have it, as your entry point into releasing the shame that you've then taken on as part of you. Moving up the chart a little bit, what surprised me was apathy is really, really low down. Apathy, according to this chart anyway, is just above shame and guilt and before grief. And I think that's really interesting because in my process, and yours I think as well, I encourage people to see grief and anger as two sides of the same coin. They're both emotions that we almost have more control over, and they can pass through us if we consciously want them to, and they create a massive amount of change. They are the gateways, if you like, in my experience, to acceptance. Acceptance is higher up, and then obviously we come into love. And I always say to my clients, we don't have to look at love yet. It's about acceptance first. You have to accept that something happened, it had an effect on you. That's the very first stage of being healed. But when I first looked at it, I thought, why is apathy low? Then if you look higher up the chart, you've got neutrality. And I think these two things get confused or mixed up a little bit because neutrality is not attaching to any one emotion. So you're allowing all of the range of emotions that human beings are here to experience, and we really are here to experience all of it. We're not here only for the joy, we're here for the whole experience. Then neutrality is feeling all of them, but not attaching to any of them, not clinging on to any of them, not judging any of them, not repressing any of them, whether they're good or bad. And apathy, when I think back to my life, is more depression. So it's different to grief. It's more like a complete collapse in the same way that shame and guilt can take over. I think that's why it's right down at the bottom, because apathy can, again, color your entire life. You can feel other emotions fleetingly, but again, it's this very heavy. It's so interesting because I think everyone knows this, but to see that it actually has a resonance that vibrates with what we're feeling inside, I think it's really validating. I went through a phase in my 20s of feeling very apathetic, which came off the back, I think, of feeling very unhappy and then feeling stuck in a life that I wasn't meant to be in. And then it's actually what led me to get divorced. I remember so vividly waking up one morning and feeling like I'd been quite naughty the night before, and just waking up going, I don't care. I don't feel anything. I was thinking, do I feel sad? Do I feel guilt? What do I feel about who I am now and how I've behaved? And I felt nothing. And that was such a wake-up call to me to change my life. I changed continent, I changed country, I changed house, I changed husband, I changed everything. But I'm so glad that I was able to recognize that apathy was so anathema to who I am as a person. I'm normally told that I'm too much, I'm too loud, I'm too intense. I remember thinking I feel like a plank of wood, which is different to neutral. Neutral, I feel, is a choice. Apathy, again, like shame, is like this cloak. I felt like a cloak of apathy and I needed to shake it off.
Well, there's an extension to the chart, which is basically how you feel. And neutrality is labeled as trust. So you're neutral, but you trust that things are going to work out. You trust that things are going to be fine. And apathy is despair. So you don't care, but you don't believe that it's going to be right. You feel like it's wrong. Like you said, you feel depressed. I think apathy is an interesting one. I don't think it's necessarily repressed emotion like the others. I think it's a side effect. Can be a side effect of adaptive behaviors. You can feel apathy if you're procrastinating all the time, or you're self-sabotaging all the time. You're negatively controlling your environment. You feel hopeless, like you're never getting anywhere. You look at what's happening politically, you look at what's happening internationally, and you feel despair.
I think it's to do with numbness. It's too much. When you've tried and tried and tried, and you end up just giving up.
Yeah, you feel like you're not in control and there's no hope.
Yeah, so like you said, if you've repressed yourself, if you've been inauthentic, if you've been wearing a mask for years, which I had been 100%, in the end, you run out of energy.
Yeah.
You literally run out of life force because your life force isn't meant to be going in that direction. And it's a necessary catalyst to give you a kick up the arse or close that door to that way of being so that you can't continue down it any longer.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think that's what the midlife crisis is, essentially. You've been playing a character for too long. You just can't do it anymore. And actually, that's probably a state, we've talked about this many times, but where men particularly decide that they need to do something. They're in that state of apathy where they just can't do it anymore. They're feeling the despair.
Yeah, so moving up, this again surprised me that grief was so low down. So grief, I think, is the 4th on the chart, which I thought was interesting because I think societally, grief's very acceptable. It's okay to grieve something. We're given space. We're given time off work. Someone bursting into tears is the source of sympathy, empathy, compassion, patience, tolerance. And yet, that's way lower down than anger. Anger, I would say, is not that socially acceptable. It was more acceptable in men. Nowadays, I think it's not acceptable in anyone, definitely not women. So I thought that was interesting that anger is actually higher up on that chart than grief. However, again, it makes sense the more I think about it because grief's a bit apathetic. It's a bit numb. It's a bit devoid of life force. However, anger is life force. To me, anger is the beginning of being able to set boundaries. It's the beginning of being able to take up space. Sometimes I visualize, literally, you've got a circle. That circle is yours. But when people start this work, us included, you're probably taking up a quarter of the tube that is yours to take up. And when we start to feel anger, yes, that may be pushing back, saying no, which could come across as aggressive or violent or destructive or whatever. But what you're destroying is what is bad, what is crushing you. So I see anger as the life force that we need, the propeller, that energy that we need to break through what is holding us stuck in this small, crushed state.
My experience and opinion on both of those things is that they're both natural. The problem is when they're repressed. Grief is a low vibration, but that's all right. That's a human experience. You lose someone you love, you should grieve that. And that's not going to be a particularly pleasant experience. You're going to be in a low frequency for a while. But the point is you dip down into that low frequency, you experience that grief as long as you need to, and then you naturally rise up. The problem is when you don't express the grief, which not many people do fully, and then you're left with a load of repressed grief in your life, which is just really low vibration. The same thing with anger. We all should be able to express proportionate anger at any one time. The problem is people are walking around with a load of repressed anger and therefore disproportionately spewing that out and projecting that out onto the people that they supposedly love, or the people that they're supposed to be looking after, or the people that they're supposed to be leading if they're in positions of power. That's not where the anger comes from. It comes from within them. It comes from this repressed source, and therefore it comes out disproportionately. But yeah, anger is a natural emotion. If you don't like something that's happening to you or in your experience, then that anger is the fuel for change, the fuel for action, the fuel for movement, so it can be a positive thing. And that's probably why it's not that low on it's fairly low, but it's in the middle of that chart. I want to talk a bit about fear, because that is low. And I think fear is one of the most common repressed emotions that I see with my clients. And it comes out as anxiety in the present moment. Most of the people I see say they feel anxiety. They don't necessarily label themselves as anxious, but they spend all their time in their head doing to-do lists, doing spreadsheets, thinking about the past, worrying about the future. And that is an experience that's fueled from fear. Fear from an unsafe environment as a child, fear from school, repressed, unprocessed fear that is experienced as anxiety in the present moment. And I see that. It creates a unhappy experience.
Well, you're totally not present and you're totally not embodied. And this is what we're here to experience, an embodied life. You're not grounded if you're anxious.
Exactly.
Yeah. So fear is a big one. I think it's more acceptable for women to feel anxiety, perhaps less so for men, because men are meant to be strong and, stable. So maybe they repress it more. But that doesn't mean that if you're expressing it in an unconscious way, that helps you release it. It doesn't. Going back to what I said at the beginning, we've got to be able to sit and feel the feelings consciously. Talking about your fears or your anxieties isn't going to touch the sides.
I don't think men associate anxiety with fear at all. They associate it with, I've got lots to do, I'm stressed. If I can just get this finished, if I can just make some more money, if I can just get this project done, then I'm going to feel okay.
I have a little exercise I call the core fear exercise, and it helps you track down from whatever surface level anxiety, stress, whatever you want to call it. Stress is a fancy name. It's like a business term for fear. But underneath it all, you can get to the core fear by asking yourself questions about whatever it is you're feeling. So if you start off at the top, say you've got a businessman who's stressed at work, or a businesswoman, I feel like I'm overwhelmed. I've got too much on. Okay, you have got too much on. That's not going to go away. What do you feel now? As in that's permanent. Now what? So you basically validate every stage and go, yeah, that's going to happen. Right. Okay, I can't cope. Okay, you can't cope because nothing's going to change. Then what? Oh, well, if I can't cope, then everyone's going to judge me. Yeah, everyone's going to judge you. Then what? But if everyone judges me, I'll probably get sacked. Yeah, you're going to get sacked. Then what? Right? You just keep going down, 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 down. When you hit rock bottom, because there's no more questions. And it's usually, as humans, we have, about 5, maybe less than 5 core fears, and they're pretty much always the same. I'm going to die. I'm going to be alone. I'm going to be unloved. It's literally, you can boil most things, however far-fetched they are, to, a human core fear. When we feel that core fear, so we bring it out of the shadow, when we make it conscious, oh, actually, my stress at work that I'm overwhelmed is down to the fact that I think I'm going to be penniless and die alone. Well, obviously, that's crazy. But no, that's the real fear. When you feel that fear, you take its power away because you made it conscious. This is what I'm feeling. That anxiety or stress much higher up that chart, as it were, it's gone. Because every time it comes up again, you can recognize, oh, well, this isn't about how much paperwork I've got to do. This isn't about the children being late for school. This isn't about my children not eating their vegetables or having too much screen time. It's actually about whatever your core fear is. Take the fear out of it, and then you can decide to let it go. So that's a really powerful exercise for not only tracking what your core fear is, but releasing it.
Yeah, and that core fear is always linked to a childhood experience. It's linked to a real experience where you felt like you were going to be alone or rejected. A very common one for my clients is they're trying to achieve something that's based on that core wound. So they're trying to achieve safety. They're trying to achieve the love of their parent. And they believe that they're going to get that by achieving these things. Like you said, it comes back to that core wound. I don't feel safe. I don't feel loved, whatever it was that happened in their childhood. And often the way that they cope with that, the way that they try and find that is the way that they did it as a child. So if I do really well at school, then I'll get the love from my father, for example. So they're just playing that out at work, and that feels really stressful and can induce anxiety. But if you can get back to the core wound and heal that core wound, then you can go about your day, you can go about your work, you can still excel in your job if you want, but you don't have that underlying fear that if I don't do it, I'm not going to get the love or I'm not going to get the safety.
Yeah, totally. I want to move on to talking about the side effects, as it were, of trying to stay in the upper parts of this chart. We're not saying toxic positivity at all. I hate toxic positivity. It's about being able to feel all emotions, but it's about being able to release them, not hang on to them. Because the higher up the chart you go, the stronger you feel. And I would say that's because, again, you're more embodied. These heavier guilt, shame, apathy, I feel like they take up part of who you are. But the higher up you go, you feel stronger because you're more embodied and you feel more creative and you're healthier. That link is one that I think most people know of it, but I think quite a lot of people still don't believe that if you're happier, you're going to be healthier, and that so many illnesses, or you could say dis-ease, because you're not at ease, stems from being in these lower frequencies. I, in the past, before I came across this chart, would say that the reason a lot of my clients have got alopecia or fibromyalgia or Hashimoto's or unexplained rashes or all this stuff that's afflicting them at the same time is because it takes up so much energy to repress emotions. And I would imagine, I don't know, again, I'm not a physicist, but I imagine it takes up more energy to carry guilt, to carry shame, to keep anger down, to keep grief in. The more we can release these emotions and allow them to flow through us, the more healthy we're going to be, because we're not using up primal life force to hold a lid down on feelings that don't want to be held down. They want to flow through us.
Well, let's look at mental health as well. If you just look at these emotions and the states, so fear is linked to anxiety, apathy is linked to despair, grief is linked to regret. If you go to a doctor, as I did in my early 30s, and said, this is how I feel, they'll say, you've got a mental illness, you need to take medication to stop you feeling this way. Whereas if you look at this chart, it clearly says that the emotions that you've got stored in your body are affecting your frequency and the way you experience life. Therefore, if you can release the emotions, then you rise up the chart, you no longer experience this way. So instead of being labelled with a mental illness and taking medication, maybe there's another option to changing your state, which is what we advocate, which is what I experienced myself in my 30s and what all my clients experience is. You change the emotional state of your body, you change your frequency, you change the way you experience life. The mental diseases or the mental illnesses you have are no longer there. But then also the external environment is a reflection of you. So it affects your relationships, it affects the amount of abundance you have, it affects everything in your life. But especially for our listeners, what it does is it creates a different environment for your children, for the people around you. If you're vibrating at a much higher frequency and experiencing things in life like bliss and serenity and forgiveness and all this stuff, that's where you're going to parent from.
Yeah.
And that's the environment your children are going to live in. And therefore, they're not going to pick up or be projected on or absorb your frequency and carry it forward in their life. So actually it affects everything, your frequency and your emotional state.
Yeah, and I talk a lot about the wounded inner child. We both do. That's the part that we work on healing. But when that child is healed, what there is then room for is the magical inner child. And the magical inner child is, I think, a good reflection of these higher states. There's creativity, joy, spontaneity, freedom, acceptance, presence, embodiment, awe, wonder. It's that part of you that wants to get all the crayons out and all the glitter and is just like, wow, this is amazing, and wow. And it's when our children, when they're little, stop to pick up every single twig or leaf, and you're like, oh my God, we've got like 2 minutes to get there. We're late. Hurry up. But what are they doing? They are in their magical child state, looking at everything that they come across with this incredible, enthusiastic curiosity. And that's the part that infuses us as adults when that wounded inner child feels safe and loved. We have to commit to releasing repressed emotions. It's so important for our health, for how we show up as a parent, for the kind of life that we attract, for the people that we attract. If you have a lower frequency, so you are carrying around guilt and shame, so I'm going off on a bit of a tangent right now, you will attract people that feed off that, i.e. people that do not have your best interests at heart. This has happened to me a lot, actually, being a woman and having sexual predators, violent predators, strangers come up to me out of the blue and attack me, hit me, mug me, aggress me, grope me, whatever it is. I've had this a lot. And it happened the most when I was at my most depressed, guilty, ashamed. It doesn't happen to me anymore, probably because I'm an older woman, I'm not attractive, but you attract people of a lower frequency. And that's not to say in any way, and I hope everyone realizes this, that victims deserve what happens to them. Absolutely not. But if you are in that victim state, that is exactly what an aggressor, a perpetrator will pick up on. There's some research actually that I think they showed some past abusers photos of who they would attack in future if they had a choice. And they went for the people, because obviously all the people in the chart had been assessed as to how successful, happy, stable they were. And they all went for the people down at the bottom of the chart, the people feeling guilty, shamed, depressed, repressed. So it's really important in terms of the life you create for yourself. You're going to attract more people of a higher frequency, which is obviously going to improve your life.
We definitely want to stress that this is not victims don't deserve what they get, but I do believe that the world is a mirror and it's reflecting back our vibration. So if you are in that low vibrational state, unfortunately, that's what you're going to get. And you're not in control of what other people do, but you are in control of your emotional state. So that is one thing you can do to change what's happening in the mirror, is change that state.
And it's always going towards what's there, not away. We are taught our whole life, especially in England, where everyone's got a stiff upper lip, to not express grief, to not express anger, to not express shame, to not express guilt. It's the kind of thing that ends up in chat rooms, right? Everyone can do it online because it's okay to do it online, but we don't do it in person. We don't own what it is that we're carrying. So I think the bottom line in all of this is that if you want to feel strong, creative, full of life force, literally have more energy during the day, if you want to sleep better, if you want to attract a better life, and this isn't just, manifesting new age stuff. This is real life, in my opinion, advice. You have to go towards the darker elements. Examine what it is that you're experiencing in these lower parts of the chart, which, like we said, we will post a link to, and hopefully you can look through this chart and just identify, am I carrying any guilt? Right, I'm going to carve out some time to feel that or write it out. Am I carrying any shame? You can literally make your way through the chart by using that as a journaling prompt. And that is how we release heavy stuff that's been there forever, holding us down. Not that you won't ever then dip into grief, dip into apathy maybe, dip into anger. But hopefully, I do think once you've removed shame, I don't think it comes back. Guilt you might feel now and then, but I don't think shame comes back in any way once you've really done that work.
Yeah, I agree, because some of the experiences you're talking about are natural experiences, anger, grief, etc. They're natural human experiences. They're just at a lower vibration, which is fine. But all of those you can experience proportionately and then bounce back up to the top. Looking at the chart, my overview on it is that the top four, enlightenment, peace, joy, love, are actually our natural states in the present moment. Like you said, that's what children experience. We're born that way, and then we get knocked off track by either our experience at home, our experience at school, experience in society, whatever it is. And unless we're in an environment where we can release all these experiences, so experiencing them and release them, then we come out of childhood with the emotional baggage of these low frequency emotions. And we just get used to living in this low frequency, finding ways to avoid, finding ways to cope. That's why alcohol, drugs, gambling, sex, they're all our attempt to find these high frequency experiences. And we might get there momentarily, but unfortunately then we just drop down afterwards because they're all dysfunctional patterns. So understanding that we're naturally in this high frequency in the present moment, and the way to exist there more often is just to release the repressed emotions of these lower frequency emotions. Like you said, you can dip into them, but if they're proportionate, you'll come back into the high frequency ones.
Yeah.
And if people understood that, rather than being labeled with mental illnesses and going on medication to try and numb these feelings, and understood that there's a process of sitting with and observing and witnessing these things, these emotions, they don't want to be there. They're actually just repressed by us, or we attach to them. People understood that we could just witness them and release all of these things, and that it raises our vibration and changes our life, then I think people would do it.
Yeah.
It's just the lack of knowledge that this process is actually quite natural to release the emotions.
100%. Well, hopefully today has shed a little bit of light on what's not exactly been a scientific discussion, because neither of us is a scientist, but the message is one of hope. We are naturally beings of love. We are naturally up there. That's why babies and children are a joy to be around. They are so pure. We all want to get back to that more pure, more loving, more open, more free state that we are naturally born in. Life then drags you down. That's okay. We've all experienced it. And I would actually say that we're meant to experience all of these states. It does make you grow, have empathy for other people. It does give you strength to know what it is to have felt shame, to have felt guilt, to have felt apathy. But we're not meant to stay there. Our job, and it's actually quite an easy one, is to work our way back up that chart through repressing what it is that we've held on to.
If what we discussed was helpful, please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. For more of the same, check out my social media, The Inner Child Healing Expert, or to work with me, go to laviniabrown.com.
You can find me on andrewlin.net or Life Coach for Dads on Instagram. We work with both individuals and couples. If there are any topics you'd like us to cover, please reach out. Thanks for listening.